don't be ashamed of your roots. It's okay to be different. And I think, especially in this day and age, people are embracing diversity. So the pathways are there, but even if they weren't, to embrace your roots and your identity. Now, one of the things that I love doing as well, that your parents are getting older, your grandparents are getting older, right? It's very important, in my opinion, to sit with them when you can, but also converse with them. Don't necessarily sit there with them on your phone, but rather, what are the stories they have?
You're listening to the East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast, released bi-weekly every Sunday at 5 p.m. on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple iTunes. All right, welcome to the East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast. Today, we have Mohammad Waqas. He graduated from UFT with a bachelor's in science and the Metropolitan University with a master's diploma in enterprise information security and an MBA in management and technology from the same university. Mohammad is a seasoned information security professional with over a decade of experience in the IT field, specializing in cybersecurity for the past 7 years. He has worked at Trillium Health Partners, Somatic, and currently is the CTO at Armis. It's a pleasure having you on, Mohammad.
Thanks so much for having me, Azam. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So I guess we could get started in your experience in Pakistan. So do you mind just talking about your experience in Pakistan and how does that relate to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in Karachi. My family's background is Sargodha. Doda, if folks are familiar, shout out to Doda. We made it. I actually moved to New York when I was 2. And I grew up in New York for about 15 years. And then I moved over with my family to Scarborough in 2007. And then I did university in 11th and 12th grade actually here as well. And then I got into what is my career now. So it's been an interesting contrast, seeing how things were growing up in New York and then seeing how things were in Toronto and GTA as well. Now, the other part is I feel like growing up in New York, it was a little bit different for me in terms of Pakistani heritage, given that a lot of it over there, it's several different cultures by all means, but growing up, weren't as many Desi people in my class. There was about 3 or 4 in a class of 30. And I really found myself reconnecting, or maybe even to a certain extent, establishing more of my Pakistani identity once I moved to Canada. There was a lot of Desi people in my class. And I feel like even with my parents, even with just the culture, whether it's through Bollywood movies or just in general, so much more, let's say, halal options, so many more diverse clubs and groups and individuals in university atmosphere as well. I feel like that really helped connect me back to my Pakistani heritage there. A little bit different, but that was my journey from Pakistan here. Now, the other part that kind of helped me reconnect as well to my Pakistani roots is my wife is actually was studying in Pakistan to become a doctor. So I would go back and forth frequently. And there was a big stark change in when I visited Pakistan back in 96, when I was about 5 or 6 years old. Then we went to 2020 when we also did Hajj at the same time. So I was, when I say 2000. So I was about 10 years old at the time. And then I went back 2014, then 2017, 2018. So I got to experience it at different stages of my life. And it really just made me appreciate really the culture, the hospitality, the people there. So really a lot of love for the culture.
So did you go back to your hometown or is it just stuck in Karachi when you returned? What was
So
that experience like? Must have been...
we have family all over. So my grandmother and a few uncles live in Karachi. My in-laws and my wife, their roots are in Karachi. But I also have a aunt in Islamabad and an aunt in Lahore, Pindi. I go to Sargodha, Doda. So a lot of different cities to visit, a lot of different people. And honestly, I think the thing that warms my heart the most is the hospitality of people. There's just so much love when you go back to Pakistan that it really makes you appreciate that people are opening their homes. And it really instilled in me a sense of humbleness that I try and carry forth in my career, no matter what it is that I'm doing and where I'm going.
Is there any specific good memories you want to mention that I guess meeting your family as well over there, but is there any specific ones that really stand out when I ask this question or?
For me, I was very surprised at just the sheer diversity and the quality of food.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm a huge
Gotcha.
fan of lasagna, and
Oh,
one of the
interesting.
best lasagnas that I've had to date has been at Vintage in Karachi. And I absolutely love that spot. That whenever I go, that's like the absolute last restaurant we visit to end my trip on a high. But other than that, it's been fun meeting up with so many different relatives because my favorite memory is probably in 2014, we went for my cousin's wedding. And a lot of us flew out from North America,
Yep.
and the actual wedding was happening in Sargodha. And then the walima was going to be, the reception was going to be in Karachi. So
Yep.
all of us went to Sargodha. There was, the whole bus ride. There was the, taking over almost half the plane. It was almost like a chartered flight, and just all the cousins from whether they were 5 years old all the way to 20 something year olds. We took over the entire floor of a hotel room. So all the doors were open. It's like one room for the aunties, one room for the uncles, one room for the girl, the guys, and so on and so forth. So I think for me, by far, that was a really fun time.
Yeah, it is awesome just to see like the number of relatives you have in Pakistan. Like over here in the North America, it's like there's not that many, or at least on my side as well.
Yeah.
So it is pretty cool to go back there and then oh, these are other relatives that saw you since you were an infant, but you never really, connected. So yeah, I guess that connection is pretty good. I guess when you moved to New York and then you moved to Canada, so I'm actually curious, like how was that transition from New York to Canada? Because was it like a really big difference? Like you briefly talked about, in terms of more individuals that might be from the Asian area, but was there any other key struggles or issues you came across when you moved to
So
Canada? Uh,
growing up in New York, especially in high school, it's very aggressive culture that I grew up in nature. So it took a lot of reflection for me to understand that, you know what? People here are nice. People here are, don't get me wrong, people in New York are nice as well, but it's just the difference in personalities, approach, the different lifestyle. Again,
yeah,
that hospitality and just that I feel that it's ingrained in the different, multicultural aspects of Canada, very welcoming, very warm. I wasn't necessarily too accustomed to that. So it was ironically me taking now that aggressive initial
yep,
personality that I have and starting to essentially form into the person that you see today. So there was that aspect of it. And I think from a cultural aspect, one of the easier things that I found, and one of the things that I really, really appreciate Canada for is they were leaps and bounds ahead of New York and other parts of the US. And I'm sure it's gotten better today in terms of assimilating different identities, different cultures, different religions into overall society. So growing up in New York, there was almost no halal options
okay,
for me to eat, right? So it was always pizza. Maybe that's why I'm a pizza fanatic, but very difficult for, let's say, halal options. Very
yep,
difficult for finding masjids and things of that nature. But moving to Canada, you have the entire gradient of all the different cultures, all the different cuisines, all the different religions assimilated into one. And it's very, very accommodating. So even when I was growing up in New York and it was Ramadan and I was in public school, not as much accommodations. In fact, people weren't even aware. So even having to explain that, it's almost, I don't necessarily want to say you're hiding your roots per se, but you're not as expressive
openly, yeah,
of the things that the different elements that comprise rather your identity. But
yeah.
coming here, it was a lot of acknowledgement. It was a lot of accommodation. It was a lot of, again, that kind of, because that existed, it was much more welcoming than legacy New York, I'll say.
And did you develop your interest in information technology or in general? I guess you first went into science, so that's actually an interesting curve. So, what was the thought process behind the undergrad, and then I guess later on you went into or got interested in information security, or did that was that in the beginning as well?
I started off the entire doctor route, right?
Oh,
It
okay,
was
interesting.
a
Okay,
pretty typical kind of a career route or aspirations, I think, for a lot of folks out there.
yeah,
Started out the entire doctor route and, and I was very enthusiastic about it. Don't get me wrong. I loved biology, loved all the different sciences and things of that nature. I was a little bit of a nerd slash geek. I'm an academic for life. I love learning. But then essentially what I learned from experience, and then I'm a huge mental health advocate. So I went through some mental health issues, especially during the latter time of high school, let's say 12th grade, also university, manifested itself in multiple different ways, anxiety attack,
yeah,
depression, things of that nature. And I feel like that really changed my view and my approach to the world. So that I feel was a very defining journey and a huge part of how I arrived to where I am today. And To just expand and pick a little bit on that, I thought to myself, what is it that you want to do?
Yeah.
And I knew, and if there's one thing I definitely credit university with, it's figuring out what I don't want to do. And that was, I couldn't see myself memorizing text or continuing to memorize textbooks. And I thought to myself, being a doctor, I'm going to be in school for 8 to 10 additional years. Do I see myself really doing this for the rest of myself? And it kind of forced me to reflect. What I did love is analytics, logics, puzzles growing up, but I had no idea, no clue about anything information security related until way after I graduated. But what that made me do is think about, what do I want to do in life? And the only thing that kind of stuck in my mind is, what am I good at? I'm good at computer. Growing up, I was fortunate to have a computer when I was a very, very young kid. We're talking like Windows 95, 3.1, 98, etc. And installing all the different games and things of that nature, but computers would mess up and they were expensive to repair. So after going through technicians, reinstalling Windows, doing whatever, working their magic, parents were like, you know what? This is getting really expensive. So you guys need to figure out how to fix the computer, or just don't play with it. Don't use it. So kind of how I started getting really hands-on with computers and figuring things out and a bunch of other things. That really drove my passion for technology. So with that being said, I almost dropped out of university. I'm going to be very, very honest with the audience. Not many people know that. My dad literally sat me down and said, "Hey, do you want to drop out?" This was like first year university.
Yeah.
And he said, "Why don't you just finish up your degree, right? Do it in whatever you want, but you've already put in 1 to 2 years. It's just going to be a waste." And especially looking further down the line, especially during those times where university degrees, bachelor's, diplomas, whatever you're looking at, was always a requirement for jobs. So he said, "Why don't you just finish it, but do whatever you want on the side?" So with that being said, I sat down and I looked at which program can reuse all the different credits that I have and which program does not require math. I can't do math. With that being said, I transitioned from cellular molecular biology to neuroscience to eventually ending up in health studies. And I did psychology and biology as a major, as a minor. And in parallel though, I would do my computer certification. So I'm a very huge advocate of starting foundational. So I started with the A+, so simple computer technician, Network Plus. And after the Network Plus, I did MCITP. So your Microsoft certifications, your Windows 7s of the world when that was coming out there, and desktop technician, that's the route that I was heading down. So I graduated eventually with a major in health studies, a double minor in biology and psychology, and I graduated with a number of different certifications in computers. And then I transitioned into the official career. But during my time at U of T, I also, in about the summer of first year, I applied to their student help desk job. And I feel like for me personally, that was a big turning point for me in my university life, because that got me exposed to everybody. A lot of the friends that I have today, it was really through that job. A lot of the skill sets that I acquired, it was actually through that job. So kind of my transition from going from health study, or rather the doctor route, figuring out what I don't want to do, what I do want to do, and just transitioning out into the information technology space.
Yeah, I find your story really inspirational because like we have this, I know in our psyche, it's that you had to go till the end, you had to finish everything. Once you decide a career, especially if it's engineering, doctor, or like lawyer, you have to finish it, right? But being able to have that mindset of saying, okay, no, wait, I see myself long-term in this? Like how, if you see other individuals in the same spot as you, looking back, like how did you push yourself to, okay, you know what, this is not for me. I need to look for a role that I'm more interested in. How do you get out that mindset of just pushing through, regardless if you like it or don't like it?
So I love this question because I think it's so fundamental to us, to my journey for sure.
Yeah.
But this is also the type of question I pose to individuals, especially as they're trying to navigate themselves, because it gets uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? Because it is admitting to yourself that and it is also involving change. And people can be uncomfortable with change. It doesn't have to be admitting to yourself that, you know what, I've wasted time. It doesn't have to be a negative connotation to this, but it's really asking yourself and being honest with yourself. When you might be asking me and I'm regurgitating my plan to, yeah, I'm going to become a doctor. Yeah, I'm going to become a doctor. Yeah, I'm going to become a doctor. But knowing full well inside that I don't want to do this. So it's kind of cognitive dissonance that exists between what I'm saying and what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always making sure that you're honest with yourself and breaking keep down inside. And this is something that one of the big portions that I'm really proud of myself, to be very honest with you, is being honest with myself in the sense of, is this something you want to do? And it is okay if the answer is no. And there's a lot of power in the word no, because that allows you to establish barriers or boundaries rather. And that also allows you to, and almost encourages, forces, pushes you, whatever word you want to use, to reevaluate. So that gap analysis, essentially, it starts with, what am I doing today? And the next natural question is this what I want to do? And when the answer is no, when you finally get to that point of saying no, I like to think of it as a tree that stems out, essentially. Then it's okay, what are the different options and what are the different routes that we can take? And there doesn't have to be a destination defined. I think that's key here. It is okay to not know what you want to do in 5 to 10 years. It is okay to spend a few years, a few months, whatever it looks like, trying to figure out what that is. But my whole thing is, as long as it's resulting in growth and as long as you're being honest to yourself, because some folks might be very driven towards certain goals, which is not a problem. And you always want to apply yourself 110%. But at the same time, be very honest with yourself, because failure is a possibility, right? But growth is certain.
Right.
And by understanding that, you know what, maybe I should have a backup plan, or maybe I should have the whole thing of hope for the best, but plan for the worst. It's just ensuring that you have different aspects or angles that you're thinking about, because that also expands your mindset in terms of, what else can I be doing? How do I ensure achieving my goals? Excuse me. How do I compensate for anything that may be a setback? How do I, and it's very important, I think, on a regular basis. I do it on when I was in university, I was doing it on a semester by semester basis. Even if I'm still on the track and I achieved the goal that I had set out for, I still pause and I said, okay, I finished 1, 2, 3 courses just to realign and just to make sure, and even just to motivate myself. I have these 10 left. And again, that's the university side. Okay, I achieved my A+, I'm going for my network plus. And then for each goal, it's a little bit of a roadmap on how do I get there. So I'm a huge advocate of having some form of a plan, and a plan doesn't have to be extremely complicated. It doesn't have to be extremely detailed. But one of the things that I noticed is it's very overwhelming to say, I'm going to become a doctor, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And the reason for that is it's such a enormous journey that we're saying that we are attributing success as binary, yes or no, but we're also overwhelmed because we just think of, oh, it's a 10-year journey. I don't know how I'm going to get there. My big thing is, let's break it down into very achievable steps, because once you have that plan, you're going to micro focus a little bit on, what do I need to do next, as opposed to accumulating 1 year's worth of steps into one thought. So it's like, I have 100 things to do. Okay, but let's break that down. You have 3 things to do this week. Let's aim for those. Let's get through this week that way. And then when you have that plan on paper and you start seeing the check marks accumulate, you're starting to see your momentum. You're starting to see your achievements. You're starting to say, you know what? I'm down this path. And you know what? Those 3, let's focus 110% on those. And let's worry about the rest when we get there. And I think just in general, for me in life, this is something that I try to do, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed, because I think a big part of a person's journey, especially in this day and age, is it's overwhelming with all the different stresses, but also all the different things that are commanding our mental capacity. You open social media, the geopolitical situation of the world, where the university paths are going, the housing market, how am I going to live? What am I going to do? It's a lot pulling at our mental capacity. So it's really important that we focus in so that we achieve maximum results and we can help block out some of the noise.
Yeah, I like how your decision wasn't impulsive. When you're in that situation where you feel lost, especially like you don't see the future, right? Like in hindsight, you can look back and say, okay, this is awesome, my trajectory. But when you're in that moment and you don't see that path, I think that just yourself organizing yourself in a way that, okay, I need to get this done, the undergrad, and then you switch it to information technology. So in terms of the thought process for a person who really wants to, if they like a field, like what's your thought, like how did you break it down specifically? Was it, okay, these the courses I need to take to reach that level? What was the research that you did, or do you recall that you did during that time period?
For the information technology side of the house or the IT
Yeah,
side of the house.
exactly. Yeah.
So what I tend to do is, again, I'm going back to I'm more foundational elements of me. I wasn't a coder. So
Yeah.
I did do computer science in high school. I did do a bunch of different programming. I took intro to programming in high school and then continue on university. But going back to, I don't like the math. I think math, like calculus AO1, is what broke me altogether. Just like the first, it's Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 a.m. First of all, I don't like math in the first place. Now I'm getting up at 8 a.m. and it's a 2-hour lecture in calculus. So that for me, I was like, you know what, I can't do this. So I hit that ceiling in computer science in mid to end of first year because 80% of computer science is actually going to end up being math. The coding is
Okay.
the easy part. It's really the math that ingrains in you that part. So I couldn't do that. I said, okay, what else? Thinking again back to what am I good at, right? What have I been doing? What skills can I use as a platform, as a jump pad to get off of? And you know what? It was help desk related because I was in university and I did help desk stuff, whether it's folks needed help with network connectivity, whether folks came and said, hey, my laptop's infected or whatever the case might be, opening up, picking up our computers, building it, things of that nature. I said, okay, let's start looking at job descriptions. Let me see what job description, what are they requiring, right? What are not only from an education perspective, but from a skill set perspective. So not only was studying the theoretical, but okay, I got to be familiar with DISM. I got to be familiar with imaging computer on a larger scale, 2, 3 of them. Let me dab in the world of virtual machines and things of that nature. So that's, again, I was working backwards from that. And my mindset was when I graduate, I'm graduating with a class of whatever, maybe 5,000, 10,000 from U of T alone. No one else is going to be applying for the same job. What sets me apart?
Right.
So that's the mindset that I was trying to go in with, that if A plus network plus are the general, let's call it standard, what sets me up? I have my MCITP. What sets me apart is I've done X, Y, and Z more than a traditional tech role, if you will. So that was how I was trying to navigate that. Now, what's great about a lot of and I was actually pretty impressed, CompTIA, which is the testing and governing body for the A plus certification, and then even Microsoft on the flip side, you can actually go on their website and they have what is the career trajectory you're looking for. If you're trying to be a
Wow.
SQL
Okay.
developer, you click on that and it also builds out like recommendations of certifications and maps and things of that nature. So when I started doing the Microsoft side of the house and I came upon that, I was like, you know what, that's pretty cool because you can also do intro certs to whether Active Directory, SQL, database platforms, things of that nature. So you can actually dabble in a whole bunch of different technologies. But essentially that's how I started building my plan. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity to work at the student help desk.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself got me exposed to a plethora of different issues as well. And also interactions with people, right? Because there might be a technical person, great, super simple to explain certain concepts and our approaches to them. But then there's also people that are not whatsoever technically inclined. There was also international students, so a little bit of a
Yeah.
language barrier at times. And one of the other parts I think that is so crucial is developing your soft skill. I think that's a really, really overlooked part. And I'm happy to dive into that a little bit further down. But I think the separator between, or rather the part where you can break through into management and hire comes down to your soft skills, comes down to dealing with people, comes down to not, and I don't mean that by just being nice to people. I'm talking about communications because for me to speak with you, if you're a financially focused individual, whether you're a CFO, whether you're a business analyst, whether you're an HR, the focus, the risk, what you care about is going to be different. So
Yeah.
me as a tech person, it's up to me to explain that in that sense. And one of the things in my career that helped me very early on is during high school, I actually worked full time along with going full time to school. So
Oh man.
my schedule was pretty fun.
Yeah.
It was 9 to about 3:30, or actually probably 8 to 3:30 or so. And then I worked for a few weeks, 4 p.m. to midnight. And then eventually that schedule changed 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And I worked for Vado, which was essentially a call center. And I was inbound technical support for Xbox 360. So people probably think that, oh, you played Xbox all day. I was like, no, I didn't whatsoever. But what that had with me is people were calling for help.
Yeah.
Right. People, especially when they're very frustrated from being on hold for 30 minutes to 2 hours,
Aggressive.
can be very hostile, can be very aggressive, can be very emotional. So understanding how to diffuse certain conversations, understanding how to disarm and discard people, understanding how to explain steps, problems to a mom that's calling in saying, hey, my son wants to play online. I'm getting this error message. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then having to walk her through the steps. And if she says, well, what's the problem? Being able to explain that and articulate that back. I feel like that really helped me establish my soft skills in dealing with people early on, because it gave me a bit of an armor or a thick skin where if somebody's frustrated, don't take it personal.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm quiet for 30 seconds while you're going at me. And I said, okay, listen, empathy. I understand. I would be so frustrated if I was in your situation. And it's like a pause, like, I didn't expect you to say that.
Yeah.
Empathizing with them. And then getting that down to, okay, understand. Let me work with you. I want to help you. Let's get to the root cause of this. Or, hey, I've called you a whole bunch of different times. I'm not getting any results and things like that. I'm like, hey, listen, I'm sorry. Help me to help you. Do you have a reference number? Let me pull up. Just give me, I don't want you to have to repeat yourself. Let me take the onus on and let me read through all the notes. I'm not going to ask you a single question. I'm going to take a few seconds. Let me read through everything. And just so I understand, this is the issue that you're having. So they're like, okay, this is a person that's taking it upon themselves, not just, again, making me go through the loop. So I think part of that helped build that situational analysis aspect of it that I really built up further on in my career. But I had that, again, that foundational element from the technical side, but also that soft skill side.
So I guess in university, did you reach out to any of the groups, or did you go to guidance counselors, or was it just basically you just searched it online yourself and then you just figured it out from there? Okay, these are some of the certifications I need to do. These are the activities I need to do, and this job would be pretty good in terms of relating to my experience. Did you have any other assistance other than your own research, or was it just basically yourself doing research?
So that one was myself. I am a very big believer on, if you're going to ask somebody for help, I think you should also take the initiative firsthand to do some research yourself. I love, and I'm at the page that I do want to mentor people and I do want to help. Absolutely. Folks come to me for different types of advice, career and things like that. And my first question to them always becomes, okay, so what did you look at so far? And what I like doing is equipping folks with the thought process of taking the next steps on their own. Have you looked at job postings? Have you tried formulating a plan? I'm happy to review your plan. I'm not necessarily going to create one for you and hand it on a silver platter, because
Yeah.
there's growth in understanding and formulating the plan. If you come to me about cybersecurity advice, it's my first question back to you is, what element of cybersecurity is it that you're thinking of? Because cybersecurity is multiple different domains, 10 domains. So for you to come to me and say, I want a career in cybersecurity, help me out here. Application security, network security, endpoint security, GRC, physical security. There's so many different elements. And sometimes folks don't know that, which is perfectly fine. But I did take it upon myself. And you know what? Google was my best friend. You don't have to know everything to start a query. It's natural human language. Hey, Google, How do I become a desk side tech? What are some interview questions that they ask you? Because again, formulating that requirements part is the first part of what any project, any type of approach. When you're building a house, you don't go to a builder and say, hey, build me my house. Hey, you go to them and say, I want 5 bedrooms. I want this. It'd be really cool to have a small little waterfall in my backyard. You have at least a baseline of things that you would like to see. So starting off with that job description, kind of what I went, understanding and looking at what are some interview questions, what they're asking about IP, DNS, translations, things like that. That wasn't necessarily in the job description, but I'm starting to unpack and uncover some more details. And to be very honest with you, I think part of the journey was taking a step and figuring it out on the way, because you're not going to figure out your entire career in university, I think, because again, that tree analogy just keeps branching out. But that's not to say I didn't use any of the services at university. I did use counseling services, again, to figure myself out, again, from that anxiety perspective. So that was very important to me because it helped me kind of break down what I didn't want to talk to the psychiatrist about. And she was very interesting for me because all she did was force me to talk. In the first few sessions we had, she said, just talk. And I said, about what? And she said, just talk. What's bothering me? I'm nothing. Right. Again, very defensive. But part of that helped me unpack stuff that maybe have been bothering, stuff that maybe I'm worried about. So from that perspective, yes, getting myself to admit some things, getting myself to just open up and even just think out loud, I think is a very, very powerful tool. And I do attribute a lot of that early kind of unpacking to my psychiatrist and to the counseling services that the university had offered. So I do absolutely encourage students, build your plan, reach out to experienced individuals that can help you and provide you some guidance, but don't rely on them. Don't expect them to build everything for you, because part of the journey is understanding and learning about yourself. Universities have great services, academic counseling, planning. If you're unsure of what to do with this degree, I graduated and I'm not sure what to do, what are some possibilities? Absolutely leverage these services. I think that's a very good point that you raised. It's about making sure that you're leveraging whatever's available in your toolkit to really make sure that you're setting yourself up for success.
Awesome. Like your mindset for mentorship is like really amazing. You could feel even for myself, like when I think about it, right? Like I avoid mentorship in general, just because getting mentors from higher up mentors, because I had some bad experiences with a few mentors. And I think so the root reason is that the dependency, you're like relying on another person to potentially provide you advice. And then when that person might be gone in the future, you're completely lost. So I really like your thought process that, okay, come up with your own plan so that in the case, like in the future, you can reach out to people and then actually figure out see if the plan is good based on their experience, but then you did your initial research. So yeah, honestly, I feel like that's such a valuable insight that you just mentioned. And it's awesome.
Appreciate that.
No, seriously. But I guess like when you completed your time at the health and then you moved on, I guess, to Trillium Health Partners, if I'm not mistaken. How was that process like? And I know you spent a few years there. How did you manage to get upon the role, or what was the process for that?
That was a journey in and of itself. I was looking to graduate a bit early, 3 years in. Summer courses, I did AP courses in high school, had some credits coming in. So I had the opportunity. However, I miscounted my credits because I figured out like, oh, I completed this course and this course accounts for 2 programs. So I met the requirements, multiple requirements of 1 or 2 courses, but the overarching credit count wasn't there. So I was a bit upset. I'm like, oh man, now I got to stay here for another semester, which is what I thought. But one of the courses I needed wasn't offered till the winter. So I was on 2 additional semesters. And again, bummed out that I was really looking forward to it. But then I took a step back and I said, you know what? This is something that can possibly work to my advantage, because a lot of students graduate in the summer. I'm not saying there's less numbers, but I said, you know what? Let's take it from that angle. Let's just say that. So I have a chance here to launch pad into possibly a slightly smaller job. So while I was working at university, I started applying to jobs in 4th year. And the way looked at it is I started, okay, September, October, let me start wrapping up some of my existing certs and let me start putting my resume together. And I started applying and I started getting some interviews here and there in November and things of that nature. And one of them I applied to was Credit Valley Hospital at the time. It was before the merger. And I went in for an interview. That was, I think that was January 8th, if I'm not mistaken, because my first niece was actually born in those days. So I very firmly remember the day. And there was an interview panel. There was an individual from HR. There was an individual who was manager of help desk, manager of infrastructure and applications analyst, and a help desk individual on that panel as well. And I thought the interview went fairly well. There was some technical questions and things of that nature. Now, when I got the job, it was not what I was hoping for. So I applied for a full-time job, obviously, and they came back to me and said, hey, would you be interested in a 2-month contract instead? So obviously much, much shorter. Right. And the reason they said is we were looking for one individual, but you were top 2. Another individual slightly got the edge on you, but you did really well. We do need a lot of help. And our fiscal year end is March, end of March. So right. After that, additional budgeting opens up. We can look at figuring out the headcount and things of that nature. So I said, you know what, to at least get the experience, yes, let's do it. 2 months. Let me just grind. Let me figure everything out. And in my mind, okay, I had the chance of going full time after 2 months. Now, there's 2 parts of this. I'm going to talk about the academic part. I was still in school. So I had a full-time job now, obviously in person. Hours were the traditional 9 to 5 in Mississauga. So I went to U of T Scarborough, had to go to Mississauga every day. Now, going back to the 2 months part, because Trillium and Credit Valley were going through a merger, they then said, we want to build and bring in-house the help desk at Trillium now. For it was outsourced to IBM at the time, and they wanted to bring it in-house. So they had a bunch of they were looking for 4 individuals, and they were hiring for that. I believe it was 2 full-time, 2 contracts, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So after I interviewed, things seemed to have gone well. I get the call that they're offering me a 1-year contract at this point. So that was disappointing. Where again, I asked, is there a possibility to go full time here? What's happening? Because I'm an internal candidate. I know the environment. It's not really making too much sense. And again, I said, you know what? Let's do it. Let's just take it. We'll see. 2 months led to a year. We'll figure out what happens. Now, the unique aspect of agreeing and taking that was the process of going from an outsource model to an in-source model. Yeah. Because what you're doing now is you're helping establish the help desk for the organization. There's different processes involved. There's different parties that you're engaging with because you're almost building somewhat of a support model. You have different applications. Hey, what are the applications? How do we support it? What are the requirements? And now you're starting to go above and beyond to help this. You're almost like I don't want to say business analysis type of thing, but you're engaging various different teams. You're building processes, things of that nature. So really, I love that step. And I'm really actually glad that I didn't get the full-time one because it changed how I looked at help desk and it helped me break out of simply picking up a phone and providing technical support. It was building processes and building a service desk entity within an organization.
Got you. And do you mind just talking about, in terms of someone who doesn't know what the job really is, do you mind just briefly, obviously not getting too private information from your experience, but just in general, like what would your job entail or when it did, sorry, not now, as when you were at Trillium?
Yeah. So so that was the first of a few roles I held at Trillium. So I was just talking about the initial, I can talk for a long time.
Specifically like the security analyst that you were eventually,
sure.
I think.
So transitioning into security, the way I got there was I was help desk. There was an opening a few months later for access analyst. So an access analyst would be in the identity realm where as doctors, nurses, new folks join the hospital, you're provisioning their accounts, their usernames, their passwords, their permissions. As folks exit, you're disabling their accounts, you're disabling a whole bunch of things. But that led to a much larger automation of identity access management project where we were looking at, if there's 1,000 tickets that 2 access analysts are handling, how do we introduce automation into it? How do we alleviate that? So I became the technical lead for that.
Yep.
Now I had no concept of cybersecurity. I knew we had a security analyst and security officer, but my mind, based on my experience and kind of that map that I had built out, as part of my access role, I was working with technologies like virtual machines, Microsoft Exchange, Microsoft Active Directory, all the makings of a sysadmin. So I was, in my mind, just going down that path. That's the only path I really saw until someone who's a mentor to me at this point. I consider him a mentor and somebody who's been in my corner for years. Shout out to Ian Patterson. He pulled me into a room and he asked me if I have ever considered a career in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And I looked at him like, have no formal education in IT and security. I did my undergrad in health studies. I don't know coding. I don't know anything. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And he said, and I remember this because he looked at me and he said, I have a high school diploma. And this is one of the individuals that I thought was the smartest individual in information technology. And when he said that, the magnitude of it kind of stepped back and I said, really? And he said, listen, what you're doing in access right now is considered cybersecurity. It is a domain of cybersecurity. And he said, he gave me really opened my way of thinking. And that's when I went back and I said, okay, interesting. I started looking up the CISSP. And CISSP, for those that aren't familiar, it's a Certified Information System Security Professional. And one of the requirements of that is having 5 years of experience.
Okay.
And he said, you've been in, and it has to be in 2 domains of security. And he said, you already have access analyst experience. He's like, you can become a security guard. And that meets the physical security requirements and certification. So in my mind, I started looking at security guard jobs online because I said, you know what, this is something that I want to do. So that is what kind of opened my mind to cybersecurity. Now, I remember there was a security analyst posting that had come up for Trillium. And I saw that the requirement, it closed in 7 days. And one of the requirements was the Security Plus that I never got.
Yeah.
So I grabbed a book, 2 books actually. And in 4 days, I wrote the exam and I passed strictly because my mindset was, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't an hour a day. For any of my certifications, I did at least 6 hours of studying a day. So I would finish work at 4, get home by 5, eat at 6, and then study till 1 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And I don't want to be removed from consideration because an HR filter that is a drop down asking me, do I have my Security Plus as a yes or no? And if I put no, I get filtered out of the candidates. That is literally the reason I wrote my exam, because I said, I'm going to do Security Plus so that I don't get removed from a filter. Had my interview, became a security analyst. That's the journey in transition to cybersecurity. Now, cybersecurity, my position as security analyst, very, very cool. What I'm fortunate with is that Trillium actually had a very small security team. I was the second security analyst, and there was a few hoops to jump through for internal hoops from a transition perspective. But because the team was small, and this happened in about 2015 before cybersecurity was really mainstream. But our AVP at the time who came in, cybersecurity was a priority for him. So he made it a priority for the organization. And that was a fundamental shift at the time. What I got exposed to was the day-to-day operations, investigating alerts, bringing in and configuring and helping install security technologies, whether it's things like firewalls, endpoint security platforms, getting my hands dirty, things like spam filters, email security gateways. And then I lived through a few incident response. That was a huge growing experience for me. There was things related to data security that I had
Yeah.
gotten involved in, investigation, breaches, things of that nature. And then eventually evolving and elevating to more of a governance risk that, hey, now we have the technologies, but we're still a very reactive group. How do we, from a program perspective, establish a security program that we have a framework that we're all marching in the same direction towards, that we're systematically elevating our security posture at Trillium? We eventually ended up getting into that route. So that's how I became a senior advisor there as well, helping to mature the overall program now, as opposed to implementing technologies at this point.
Got you. And do you have any advice for individuals, at least now, or I'm not sure if you're keeping up with the designations, to break into cybersecurity? Do you have any like advice?
Yeah, I would say cybersecurity is such a broad field that
Yeah.
everyone can get in. So you don't have to be coder. You don't have to be some guy in a hoodie at a coffee shop on a laptop, as hackers are portrayed and stuff like that. You like coding, you can absolutely get into cybersecurity, securing application code. You are a sysadmin that knows a infrastructure Active Directory inside and out. Great. Now you can put on the hat of how do I secure it? Same thing with network engineers. That's on the technical side. But if you're looking at a financial individual, great. You know what you can get into? You deal with finances left and center. You can get into auditing computer systems, auditing, ensuring that, whether there's separation of duties, somebody who's creating a payment can't also be the one approving it and things of that.
Yeah.
These are all core fundamental areas of cybersecurity. If you're somebody in policy making, what's huge in cybersecurity? Having overarching governing policies that everybody has to abide by. The technical folks that are, whether it's desk side technicians, whether it's endpoint security, they're not probably the ones writing the policies, because writing a policy is a very involved process where you're thinking of multiple different angles. You're thinking about risk. And I think that's the big piece here, is that cybersecurity is an element of risk. It is not necessarily technical. And it's elevated to such a point at the board level, at the leadership level, C levels, that everybody cares about cybersecurity. But it's important to translate the cybersecurity into business risk, into the elements that they care about. So
Right.
having somebody that understands risks, you can shift over into cybersecurity, right? Somebody in HR can shift into cybersecurity. So all that, my big thing for folks that are looking to break into cybersecurity, it's a hot field. There's tons of jobs that are open. Don't let your current role limit you or lead you to think that you cannot get into cybersecurity, because it is a super technical field. It is a very, very wide industry, very wide area, multiple different domains, 10 domains. I would encourage everyone to just Google, what are the domains of cybersecurity? And then you'll be well-versed in terms of, well, I can actually go into these 2 or 3 from a technical perspective. Someone else can go into 2 or 3 from another perspective, right? From a cyber insurance perspective, so on and so forth. So that's my big thing. I think the other part is, I think reaching out to folks and just asking for advice, especially if you're young in your career and you're not too sure where to start. There are folks out there there are groups out there, even on LinkedIn, as an example. There's a massive cybersecurity Canada group that
Yeah.
folks can post questions of. Hey guys, what are some top 3 recommendations you have? Again, my thing is, be targeted in your question. Ask for top 2, top 3 type of things, but don't come in and say, hey, I'm new to cybersecurity. How do I get into this? That's too broad to answer.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the last one as well is, there's a lot of programs out there. YouTube is a very simple and easy, great place to learn, right? Quick 5-minute videos, podcasts like this. Ryerson has the Catalyst Cybersecurity Center as well. They have great 6-month courses that get you hands-on. Figure out what it is that you want to do, and then get started. That is my big thing, is get started in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's setting up a virtual machine, learning how to configure it, whether it's understanding what cyber insurance aspects ask for, understanding what ransomware is, how does it interrupt business operations, so many different ways that you can learn. My big thing is, understand where it is that you think might have some interest, and then just get started.
Awesome. So I guess we can wrap up the professional side. So right now you're working as a CTO at Armis. So that's an incredible journey from where you started, where you are now. In hindsight, I'm sure you're extremely proud of it. So do you mind just talking about like how you managed to accelerate from where you were at Trillium all the way to the CTO now?
My big mantra is chase excellence and the success will follow, right? So no matter, my very first job was a part-time job, a fast food restaurant. But you know what? I showed up every single day. I showed up early. I took on the challenge. When I got busy, you know what? There's things to learn, time management skills, so on. When I was help desk, I would go, I fixed a printer, I did whatever. When I became Access, I actually didn't apply for the job. And the director of IT reached out to me and said, I remember you from 3 to 4 months ago. You came in, you fixed my printer. We had a great conversation. Why don't you apply? Because I see a lot of potential in you. So that's the recurring theme that happened in my career. The way I transitioned over to Armis was actually the country manager came to Trillium and I had a conversation about it with him rather. And the conversation was forward looking, like where's the industry headed? And I'm very passionate about data security, cloud security. And we were having this conversation again. This was a few years ago where I said, you know what? It's the user is the new perimeter. Folks aren't targeting laptops. They're targeting people. Social engineering. They're targeting trying to steal their credentials and then log in an authentic manner, right? A legitimate manner. And then they have access to your system. So it was a really, really great conversation. And that conversation spurred additional conversations in terms of eventually moving over to the vendor side of the house, where I found myself in sales. And I was a huge introvert. People a few years ago would be like, you in sales? I was not very chatty. I was timid, shy, and I really believed in listening, processing, and then responding. Traditional, I think, legacy ways of thinking of leadership is somebody who's always talking, who controls the room and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So when I went to Armis, part of our process for POVs or proof of values, the POC concepts, we deploy our collectors, we do a discovery of your environment. And then what we do is we do that translation of, hey, here's 100,000 different devices that we found you to know about. Here's the different things they're doing. But here's what it means to you. Here's the risk it poses to you. So to an engineer, that's a very different conversation. We present our findings to directors, leadership, C-levels, etc. So I, obviously having a lot of experience in health, when I started presenting this internally saying, hey, these are the different risks that exist, and this is what can manifest. Here's a vulnerability that we know based on my previous life, but also based on the industry trends that are happening, is something that's actively being exploited by attackers. And this is probably your highest risk in the environment and your ransomware and things of that nature. And here's some recommendations on how to remediate that. That was going above and beyond what's found in our, let's say, console. That was me also doing research into trend, research into a bunch of different things, applying. It's a C-level. What do they care about the most? Ransomware is a huge one. So here's what you need to secure funding in order to be able to procure Armis and things of that nature. So from that, I had the opportunity to become the principal engineer, the principal solutions architect for Armis, where globally I had the responsibility for assisting different teams in doing that type of risk analysis and translation, highlighting what are the most critical aspects for all of our healthcare core prospects and clients. And then after doing that for a little bit, I become the CTO. And along the way, I've also had personal goals as well, where I want to speak at a conference. I do have a lot of imposter syndrome that I still deal with. That am I good enough? Do people really care about what I'm saying? Do I have something of value to contribute back to the community? And going back to Ajay, he inspired me for my very first submission for speakers, where I said, I really want to do this. That's a personal goal of mine. I don't know how. And he said, just submit to Sector, which is Toronto's and Canada's premier cybersecurity conference. And I said, yeah, but I'm not a researcher. I don't have that experience. Going back to what I said to Ian, I don't have formal education. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
He responded with, you have experience. You have stories, like actual true stories based on you investigating breaches and all the work that you're doing at Armis. Tell it. People have things to learn. And that's what lit up a light bulb. So I did submit it. And I did get accepted. And then I got accepted at RSA. And then I got accepted at a few other spots. So I think from someone who felt that they had nothing to contribute and folks wouldn't really care about what I had to say, I'm blessed and very humbled to have been accepted at about 13 different conferences as a speaker.
Yeah.
And that's my thing as well. Growth for individuals, right? Going back to a little bit of that advice is, what's the worst that can happen? They're going to say no. That's okay. That's okay. So submit that paper, build it, take the time out, take the initiative, submit it. It's another thing to add to your resume. It's another thing, but more important than that, it's another thing to add to your growth as a person. Now you're developing that public speaking, etc. So that eventually led to my becoming a CTO, basically because I had that global responsibility. I had the opportunity to speak with executives, understand their frame of reference, then understand going back, helping build the Armis platform and the product to meet more of a business aspect of it, strategy in terms of product management. Where are we headed with the platform? How are we building a security program for our existing clients? What are the business strategies, marketing strategies, business plans going after new clients? But by all means, I can't take entire credit for all of this. I have an amazing team, a lot of support at Armis, and shout out to them. A huge amount of credit goes to them as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess I can ask these last two questions. I find these the hardest question, and I'll leave them at the end here. But in terms of how do you define success, like professionally or personally? You can go anywhere with this question. You can take your time because I find this to be a little challenging because it's very broad.
How do I define success? I think for me personally, success in anything that I do is something that helps me grow and become a better me in any regard. So I'm growing. An example is, and I know it doesn't show, but I'm trying to go to the gym. Okay. Look, all the pakorde and things like that. I'm glad the camera's up here and not lower. And I know when you go to the gym, it can be intimidating because you go in and you see somebody that's been going to the gym for 2 years. His biceps are bigger than my head. And I'm going to a bar and there's no weights on the bar. And I'm kind of like looking around and I'm timid, I'm shy, and I'm embarrassed. But why? This person, and I'm a huge believer that you can learn something from every single person. You inspire me. I want you to know that publicly on your platform. The fact that you've taken this initiative, the fact that you're reaching out to different folks and you're building something that, quite frankly, I was super excited to tell my dad because I said, you know what? This is a phenomenal idea for taking experiences, but not of people that are not the journey of, you know what, you're a CTO. Tell me how you got there. It's about the personal aspect, transitioning. I love it. It's brilliant. And kudos to you. And that initiative, that passion, I look up to that. So when I see folks in the gym, it can be the biggest bodybuilder. I'm like, this person's probably been dedicated to the gym for 2 years. When I see people complain, oh, New Year's, now everybody's going to be at the gym. When I see somebody that maybe of a heavier set and they're on the treadmill, so you know what? That's dedication. That person is realizing I want to better myself in some way, shape, or form. That's inspirational. So my big thing is when I go into the gym, it's me against myself. It can be an empty bar. It can be 5 pounds, whatever it is. But you know what? That's 5 more pounds than I lifted 2 weeks ago. And then when I grow to 7.5 pounds, adding those tiny little 2.5 pound plates, that's better than I was last week. Yes, I'll hit setbacks where I said, you know what, I'm too tired to go to the gym. But you know what? It's the little things, the consistent things that help you grow as a person. Reading 1 page of a book is better than reading no pages of a book. So for me, from a personal aspect, it's what makes me a better person, what makes me grow compared to the previous week. I think from a success perspective, the reason I like leadership, mentorship, and things of that nature, I think from a leadership perspective, historically, there's been a certain persona of what a leader looks like, how they behave, how they run teams, more like a general type alpha personality. I think I'm coming in from a different approach where I'm more looking at a very team-oriented objective, I think, but also linking that to everybody is an individual that has a story. What's your personal goals? let's help you achieve, let's help create a journey for you as part of my team as well. So I think the personal satisfaction I drive as well is helping enable others. What did we collectively today accomplish? I don't ever like taking credit 110%. You know what? This is what I did. I cringe at that. This, for me, you'll always hear me say, this is what we did, because there's
Yeah.
so many people that have contributed to this overall success. I think from a professional perspective, success for me is also, just given my current capacity, is helping secure healthcare organizations, whether it's a small 100-person hospital, community clinic, whatever it is, to a massive million employee hospital system. The fact that we are materially helping them reduce their risk posture, helping them improve their security posture, really making a difference. And the reason for that is hospitals should never be the targets of anything. You're
Yeah.
helping sick individuals, you're helping individuals that are vulnerable, that are at their weakest. So for us to be able to make that difference, I think that for me is what success is. I think for me personally to help individuals grow, for me to help myself grow, those are what success look like across the board for me.
Awesome. And I guess just to end off this interview, I know like for people who've moved to the West, Europe, US, Canada, and eventually there'll be people who are born in the West and have no like potential exposure to Pakistan. Is there any specific cultural, areas that a person should keep as they progress in the West? Is there anything that links specifically to your Pakistani heritage that really has allowed you to be successful? Do you have any comments on that?
I think for me, the big one is don't be ashamed of your roots.
Yeah.
It's okay to be different. And I think, especially in this day and age, people are embracing diversity. So the pathways are there, but even if they weren't, to embrace your roots and your identity. Now, one of the things that I love doing as well, that your parents are getting older, your
Yeah.
grandparents are getting older, right? It's very important, in my opinion, to sit with them when you can, but also converse with them. Don't necessarily sit there with them on your phone, but rather, what are the stories they have? I find them very inspirational because keep in mind, whether it was they who had transitioned here, my dad came here, or rather to New York in 1990. So he
Yeah.
actually moved 2 years before we did. So imagine somebody leaving their entire family behind, a newborn kid, etc. They're coming to New York, but they don't have anything. They're not coming with $1 million in their pocket. They're going to go buy a house. No, they were literally coming to the West Side to enable a better life for their family. The challenges that they went through, absolutely unique. I was talking, my parents were telling me they used to spend almost $700 a month on their phone bill because they had absolutely nobody. And it would cost about $3 to $4 per minute for
Yeah.
them to call back. But that link to family is so important. That's what got them through a number of different challenges, right? The fact that you have somebody that's coming here and say, okay, where do I even search for a job? So I think being able to understand the challenges, the difficulties, the journey of grandparents, of your parents, of your uncles, and what have you, there's a whole bunch of different lessons in and of itself for that. And I think the other part is visit your roots, right? Not necessarily as a tourist, because you know what? Dubai is an amazing place. Beautiful. I know everybody's attracted to that Burj Khalifa, this and the fountains and all that. Abu Dhabi with the Sheikh Zayed Mosque and everything. But what about taking a few minutes to go outside of it, right? Visit the locals, see how the locals live, because it's not all the glitz and glamour for the local individual, but they have their own certain way of life. So when I go to
Yeah.
Pakistan, being able to see how folks live is so extremely humbling, because even when you go to a village, don't be embarrassed by it, but look at how people, because one of the fundamental things that I notice when I go to Pakistan is, you know what? Kids might be playing with dirt. Kids might be running around. They're playing cricket in the village. They're doing what kids do, right? But at the end of the day, you know what they are is they're happy,
Yeah.
right? They're happy with so little, and we have so much, and we're not as appreciative.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that really ties back to I love going to Pakistan now because I really appreciate what the familial links are, the ancestral links, the relationships, things of that nature. And again, going back to the hospitality aspect of it is everybody's really warm and welcoming. We should be warm and welcoming right back to them. And we should be honoring and making sure that we remain and we ensure that we establish and keep these relationships and keep the story going. Let's not be, whether it's transferring to the West, whether it's being born in the West and then just moving ahead with this and forgetting all of the history of our own personal. Because what do
Exactly.
you see when you come to the West? All the different cultures celebrate their history. All the different cultures honor different figures in their past that helped build and helped bring them here. We should be doing the same exact thing. And folks that have parents that are still alive, sit with them, spend time with them, understand them, listen to them. So much to learn. And then so much for us to pass on and even to compare that generational difference. So I think that's what I'll end with, that I think is paramount of importance as we grow and build our own lives and families on this side.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mohammed, for taking the time on the weekend to
This
get
was
on this interview and just sharing your insight. Thank you so much. It's been really insightful.
absolutely, it's been a pleasure. And again, kudos to you. The videos have been amazing. The experiences have been amazing. Keep doing what you do as well.